Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Museum Show and Tell show. My name is Nicole. I'm from the Penetanguishene Museum, and I'm here with Genevieve from the Huronia Museum.
Howdy.
Today in our episode, I challenged Genevieve to try to find a small artifact from our collection. And because I challenged Genevieve, I get to go first. So surprisingly, when I went to look for some of our objects, I did discover that we've done a lot of our small artifacts in the past, just because, you know, it's so much easier to show off smaller artifacts in this. But one item I don't think we've talked about is we have some money here. Actually, I'll show you in our little case here, so it's a little bit easier to see. And we have them here also. This 5 cents and this being $1, and they are called, what we call them is Beck bucks. And so what they were is we are inside the old general store that was owned by the Beck Manufacturing Company, and he was well known to be to pay his employees, this is back in the late 1800s, half their wage in this Beck money and half their wage in Canadian currency. Sorry, the phone's ringing. Right, so yeah, so we have this money here, and I always say it's like, you know, nowadays if you worked at Canadian Tire and Canadian Tire gave you half your money in Canadian Tire money instead of actually giving you half your money in real money, because the whole idea of Charles Beck paying their employees half their money in Canadian or Beck bucks was so that they would spend it inside his general store. And that's why he had his general store going. He actually had 2 of them here in town. So everyone that worked at his lumber mill was given this money. They could pay it at the 2 stores. They could also pay, he owned a lot of homes and they paid rent, so they could pay rent in Beck money. And because most of the, the people here in town who are not farmers or fishermen or guides or worked, somehow for the government, they did work for the Becks, and they, so a lot of other merchants in town started to also accept some of his Beck money. And it was very, very common back in the late 1800s. For lumber mills or for general stores to do this, to make up their own money and give it out. And part of that is just because the Bank of Canada wasn't as organized. If you think about the history, Canada did not become a country until 1867. Charles Beck came here in 1867, and he built his store in 1875. And so a lot of these just smaller towns were able to to help with the economy in a way. They did have their own form of payment, just because the Bank of Canada was really just not that well organized right away to get to those smaller communities. But it is interesting that we do have letters in about 1911, 1912 from Prime Minister Laurier's office asking, please stop using Beck bucks. So by the early 1900s, Bank of Canada was much more organized, and you had to start using their currency, and but Charles Beck was still trying to pay with his Beck bucks. And it's also very reminiscent of a time where monopolies, were a thing, where big, large, powerful people would own, a lot and have a monopoly over something. And so this kind of teetered on that sort of territory, and that's why it had to really end when they were starting to be strict with anti-monopoly laws. So that is what we have. Apparently, we do have quite a few different sets, full sets. They were all very light. These are extremely light. I wish our money was made out of this nowadays. And I know it's not, because it would be very easy to counterfeit it as well. But it's made out of a very light aluminum. And well, you can see here, the sizing of it, would go down in the denominations, and they still had, the sort of the copper color for the penny. This is $1. They had 50 cents. That's 25 cents. That's 10, 5, and then the penny. When this was being manufactured, probably in its heyday, you're probably being paid like $1 a week if you worked at the lumber mill.
Goodness
So
me.
that shows you a bit of a comparison for this. So
Wow.
that is my object. And we also have money from the Thompson General Store here in town too, because they also produced a little bit of their money. We have one 50-cent coin, but we don't have too much from that store, and we don't have any other. I don't think any other merchants here in town made up their own money for that time. So.
That's right. I think we do have a few examples in our collection from businesses in town. I think the Playfair Preston Company, which is where the bowling alley and the cab stand are today, down at the foot of King Street. But I'm not entirely sure, because it was a different business, I guess. It was a store. It wasn't really run through a mill or by a mill or for CSL or not CSL, Great Lakes Transportation Company employees, whether the coinage, the tokens that we have were given, I guess, to employees especially, or whether it was just for the general population. And these are things you were given like as a bonus, kind of like ceramic or tea towel giveaways that you'd get more recently, or encyclopedias at the or Charlie Brown books, I guess, at the grocery stores.
Yes, yes. I wondered that too about the Thompson one as well, if that's what it was given out.
Yeah, because you don't have that
association. It was just given out as change. You give them, you give them $1 and they give you back 50 cents in their money to make sure you bring it back to them. I don't know.
That's right. And you're kind of stuck stopping there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I brought something in today that is kind of currency related and other small artifacts from our collection. These are all glass 17th century glass trade beads from an archaeological site over in Tay Township. It was a 1640s mission site called St. Louis. It was a native village that the Jesuit missionaries who were here had moved into. The interesting thing, I guess, that you have to keep in mind when you talk about trade beads, we've got a lot of different ones. This is it's hard to see through the plastic, but this is a blue, very bright blue. We've got long beads. We've got small aqua colored seed beads. This is a difficult one to see, but this is a multicolored bead. It has blue and then a blue core, a white ring around it, and then it's encased in red glass. We've got long beads like this that are squared, even larger beads like this sort of brownie colored one, and then a really long glass tubular bead like that. We've got hundreds in our collection. There were hundreds of bead manufacturers in Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries, and they made a huge, I guess, variety of glass beads, different colors, different styles. They were drawn. They were different manufacturing techniques were used to make them. And I know historically, when we learn about early trade in Canada, especially in elementary school, the fact that beads were used kind of gets is talked about rather derisively. I know, for instance, when you talk about the purchase of the Manhattan, they'll say, oh, it was almost given away for a handful of beads to the Dutch people. But when you talk about beads in that context, you're really removing the importance of the beads or the symbolic value of the beads to the native people, and really, I guess, reducing their role in trade. beads had been used historically by many different native groups in North America. They were manufactured by them. They were made out of a number of different materials like shell, bone, pottery, copper, claws, nuts, seeds, hooves, horns, fish vertebrae, pearl, teeth, stone, and fossils. They were used as usually as decoration, but they were vital in displaying cultural signals, and they were really, I guess their importance didn't lie in their financial value, but rather in their symbolic or perceived value to the native people. They could often be used, I guess, to cement relationships, be given as goodwill gestures. So they weren't seen as trinkets or cheap objects the way we or the tend to see them today, or even possibly the way the Europeans valued them at the time. They were really important culturally to the native people for a lot of different reasons. And I think it's really important that when you see beads like that, or when you talk about them historically and note their use in different exchanges between in the fur trade, or different meetings, I guess, that you have to recognize that they weren't valueless to the native people, because that really diminishes their role, or their intelligence and their value, I guess, their own agency in relationships. So these are really important cultural markers, I think. So yeah.
That's so neat that you have those beads, because actually that was one of the things I was like, do we have any, beads in our collection? That was the first thing I was gonna look for. And then we don't have any here at the museum. Yeah, we're really lacking a lot of artifacts, sort of pre-contact, or indigenous or First Nations,
contact, yeah.
and and just, I know because Huronia Museum has been collecting them for so many years and has been around for so much longer, than the museum here too. So that's been the spot. So it's always neat when you bring some of those out for us. Because I think it's very interesting, yeah, to see that you found those, in this area, and they are also very different. And yeah, and the significance of them, because in reality, I mean, this is probably sillier for us to covet than beads are, right? Like, this is what we use, and trade for. So that seems silly as well. So, or seems silly, and but yeah, bees, I never thought of it, that it seemed silly that they, traded for beads. I never thought of it that way, but yeah, I guess people would,
They do tend to, yeah, look at it sort of derisively.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what's also interesting about beads, this is kind of off topic, Kenneth Kidd, who excavated at St. Marie, Kenneth and his wife, Martha Kidd, they created the first, I guess, typology for glass beads. I guess it's a starting point for all the current research on the bead manufacturing and typologies. It's really amazing stuff if you like typology. So he's had a huge collection, and I know a lot of the beads that he had collected and that he based his typology at, they're actually St. Marie has them in there, because Kenneth Kidd was one of the first archaeologists to work at St. Marie, and so they're really lucky to have that.
And did they have that
on there?
Do they have that
not as far as I know, no. When I worked there, it was in the back in storage, but it's a massive collection of all sorts of hundreds, maybe even thousands of different kinds of beads, one of each in their typology. And it's a really great place, a great starting place for bead research for archaeologists.
For anybody else there that's
and anybody, yeah, they're wonderful to look at, the variety and the color and vibrance.
Neat.
And you can understand, really, these are so different. The glass beads are so different from anything that the native people were manufacturing. So you can understand their excitement when they saw them, the vibrant colors. I mean, this one's not so exciting in itself. It's kind of browny, but all the blues and the aquas and the star patterns that you could create, these glass manufacturers could create in their blowing and winding, and it's just yeah, magnificent stuff.
And for the audience, what would the typical bead of the First Nations be made out of?
We have in our collection, we have a lot of shell beads. So they're plain white shells, kind of discoidal. They're not like a seed bead, a round bead, but they're kind of flat. We also have a lot of beads that are made out of bird bone. Bird bone is very light. It's very hollow. Next time you're eating chicken, take a look. And they're nice and lightweight for, I guess, physiological reasons, and they make perfect beads. So you don't have to hollow them out; they're already come hollowed. And yeah, so we've got a lot of claw, some claw, bear claw, some deer teeth, dog teeth, canids or canine teeth, and fish vertebrae. So we have a lot of those in our collections. And I mean, you can get a variety of forms, obviously, but not the same variety of color that you get with the European. So they're very attractive, and because of the rarity of them early on, that really would place a high cultural value on them for the native people.
Great.
So really
That was
interesting
so
to study. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. So, all right. So, what is our theme for next week?
Well, I thought we could continue on with this subject of bling. You've got a beautiful necklace I can see right there, and I've got a little small gold pin. So how about we do something that has to do with decorative items, any kind of decorative.
Oh, neat.
Bling, personal bling, or your home, or your car, or I don't know, your train. Manufacturing facility, whatever it is you have for a decorative item.
Great. That sounds like a neat topic for next week. All right. So we'll see everyone again next week. Bye.
Bye. Have a great weekend.